In July 2019, my wife and I packed up our stuff, quit our jobs, and took off to travel the world. It's been quite a wild ride for this over 2-year journey. The world is quite a different place than it was when we left, and I've learned countless things on my travels, some of which I kind of had an inkling of before, but you know, this adventure has really reinforced a lot of those beliefs and opened my eyes to some other perspectives. So these are 10 things that I've learned since I quit my job to travel. When we left LA, we took off up the West Coast and across Canada and eventually down to Florida on a massive road trip, which was kind of the first segment of our travels. The first thing that struck me was how much cheaper it is the slower you go. The slower you travel, you end up spending less money because, especially on a road trip, if you're covering a lot of ground every day, you're burning a lot of fuel. But if you can find a relatively cheap campground or place to stay or a free campground to hunker down and just explore as much as you can in that area, it becomes a lot cheaper. A lot of people think it costs a lot more to travel than it actually does. When you get out there and start traveling and finding the best budget accommodations and budget places to eat, you find you can do it for a lot cheaper than what you think you can initially. And that kind of goes along with this idea of expectation and sort of what you think you need to survive. The longer we've been traveling, the more I realize like I actually need very little. And so I start thinking back to the stuff in the storage unit. I start thinking to the stuff that's in storage in Florida and like stuff I haven't seen in years. And it's like, I don't even know what's there. Obviously I don't need it. And when you see that, you see how you can sort of adjust your spending habits to allow you to have more experiences versus more stuff, because the stuff just kind of accumulates and sits there. It doesn't really add much value to my life, especially now when it's in another country. But so that idea of money, I think, is a big stumbling block for people when it comes to travel. They think I need to have X amount of dollars to go travel. I need to be a millionaire, or I need to have a ton of money, and it's just not true. You can do it for a lot cheaper than what you think. And when you start to realize that spending on material things isn't going to add more value to your life, you can kind of adjust your spending habits accordingly. And for me, something that's been really reinforced in the past 2 years has been that this idea that, you know, you can always make more money. You'll always have an opportunity to make more money as long as you're, you know, living and breathing. However, when your time runs out, that's it. You can't get more time. You can't buy more time. You can't work for more time unless you're like a billionaire hedge fund with a blood boy who's getting blood transfusions. But even then, they're gonna run out. You know, this sci-fi notion that, you know, eventually we're gonna live forever, we're gonna live for hundreds of years. I don't buy it. Time is our most precious resource, and I think that in a lot of ways, just kind of working the same job every day, not only does it lead to repetitive stress injuries, carpal tunnel syndrome, you know, diminished work-life balance, diminished quality of life, because you have what they call lifestyle inflation. The more money you make, the more you feel like you have to spend to justify what you're making, and then you have to work more to justify what you're spending, and it just becomes a vicious cycle, you know, the rat race. But the truth is that I found I'm actually happier with less stuff. I'm happier with more time to do what I want. And I think that's the most important thing to remember when it comes to travel, is that you're not constantly just spending money. And I think that's a big difference between travel and vacationing. A lot of people say things to me like, oh, you're still on vacation? Oh, that's quite a vacation. You're really on this 2-year vacation or whatever. And it's actually, we're not on vacation. We're traveling. So the distinction being, vacation is sort of a set time frame. You know, you get your 2 weeks vacation, you go to your all-inclusive resort, you drink a bunch of alcohol, and you sit on the beach. I think for 90% of people, at least in America, that's their idea of a vacation. Traveling is a more immersive experience where you're learning about the culture, you're learning about the nature, you're learning about your surroundings, you're getting more meaningful experiences out of what you're doing. And they're not necessarily experiences that you have to pay for. That's another thing. Travel, I feel like, is a lot of like touristic stuff, tourist trap stuff. You know, you jump on the tour bus, you do this kind of set routine, whereas travel is more about adventure and discovery. Even in the most expensive countries around the world, like Switzerland, for example, was one of the first countries we flew to overseas. on this trip, you can still do it cheaply. So I think the idea of making sure you have enough money, trying to save up enough money and worried about whether you have enough money is kind of a thing that can become a stumbling block to prevent you from doing it. I think a lot of people subscribe to that mentality of kind of the bucket list mentality, I call it, or the bucket list fallacy. And that is, one day I'm gonna do this. One day I'm gonna do X. When I have this amount of money, when I have whatever, when I own a home, when I'm done working, then I'll do this. Then I'll travel and I'll cross all these things off my bucket list. And I think the big problem with that is, to me, it represents something called conditional happiness, because they are delaying gratitude or satisfaction or happiness with their lives until they're done working or until they feel secure with the amount of money they have. And I think that idea is flawed for several reasons. The first one being, you're basically waiting until you're older, an undetermined point in the future when you think you'll have enough money, but you may not have the same health. You may not be in the same physical condition. You could lose use of your legs. You could end up with cancer. And so delaying it way, way in the future like that, you just don't know what the state of the world will be or the state of your body. You know, look at all the people who retired last year or a couple years ago, and now they're limited in what they can do. They've retired, but now, you know, there's a global pandemic, so they can't go. Maybe if they wanted to travel somewhere, they can't travel there. There's just a lot more things that are out of your control when you delay it. So obviously a certain amount of planning and saving, but you don't have to wait as long. You don't have to wait until you retire to live a full life of travel and adventure. And I think a lot of times people put stuff on bucket lists. They're waiting, they're delaying their happiness. They're saying, I'm gonna be happy when I can visit the Statue of Liberty or the Taj Mahal. But until then, I'm gonna keep my nose to the grindstone. And I think that mentality, it serves sort of this corporate rat race mentality of consumerism and material goods, but it doesn't do a lot for your mental health and for your physical well-being. I'd say a lot of people who follow the bucket list fallacy also end up putting a lot of the same cliche things on their bucket list, and they don't realize that when they get there, there's going to be thousands of other people who have it on their bucket list, so you're not really going to get an authentic personal experience. I'm anti-bucket list because I feel like every day should be a bucket list. Like just sitting and enjoying the moment in the present, open to what happens, like that is a bucket list experience, because I've had so many experiences where I never would have thought this would be amazing, but it just turned out to be the most wonderful thing that I've ever experienced. Or just something I never even thought of, like the Kepler track in winter, for example. Here, it's a great walk. When we did it, it had snowed all night long, and just crossing the ridges of these snow-covered mountains with no one else around, it was a truly magical experience. Never would have thought to add that to my bucket list. I feel like people get trapped in the bucket list. I feel like the bucket list is, okay, when I hit 65, I'm gonna do boom, boom, boom. I'm gonna cross these things off my bucket list. And I think that in a lot of ways that's setting you up for failure, because it means that you can't be happy until you do these things. And I think you can be happy now, and you can live almost as if every moment was crossing something off your bucket list if you truly invest in experiencing life to the fullest. And I think that for me means, you know, not slaving away just trying to make money and chase material things. I think it's about experiences, new experiences, learning about our natural world, learning about new cultures, and experiencing new foods and sights and sounds and smells, some good, some bad. And so that is a big thing that's been reinforced on this travel as well. The bucket list fallacy and this sort of conditional happiness, like I'll be happy when I'm retired, or I'll be happy when I can do this trip, when I have the money. And it's like, snap out of it. You can do that now. Or you could do that maybe not now, but if you save money for a couple months or a year, you could do that next year. And so don't get me wrong, some planning and saving is necessary, but I don't think you have to delay that for 30 years or 20 years or until you have a certain number in your head. I think you can do it for much cheaper. One thing that has blown me away on this trip, and something that I knew before but wasn't really confronted with the stark reality of it, and that is the climate change. I mean, the world is rapidly changing. The reefs are dying. There's rapid deforestation, desertification, the receding glaciers, the receding glacial lakes. I mean, the world, it seems like it's dying. I mean, I'm sure the planet will be fine. I don't know if human beings will survive, But that is something that I've seen on countless occasions, whether it's wherever we've been, Canada, Nepal, Thailand, Malaysia. In Malaysia, we went to Borneo. We saw the rampant deforestation of the Borneo rainforest. Powerful scenes of seeing a mother orangutan with her baby and pygmy elephants with their baby in these tiny little corridors of rainforest that border the palm oil plantations, and learning about the reality of just those animals in Borneo in particular, seeing that the local people know they're endangered, and yet they're continuing the deforestation. They're continuing to, if one of those animals wanders onto the plantation, they get killed, they get poisoned, they get shot, even though they're protected supposedly. I mean, it doesn't seem to matter. So that's something that has been a glaring, not necessarily a positive thing, but just something staring you in the face. You know, I knew palm oil was bad, but when you see a mother orangutan with her baby, and you're not sure that baby's going to survive, you know, you're not sure that habitat is going to survive so that baby can live, it's very powerful. It's very sad to see. And so why would you delay experiencing something like that? You know, we have to learn, we have to see firsthand what we're fighting for. We have to see what we're fighting against. And so I think travel and adventure and discovery and seeing these animals in their natural habitat. I mean, you could talk all day long, you can read all the articles you want, but when you see that baby orangutan, and you know they probably won't survive because the government, the corporations are just deforesting their habitat, it's really powerful. And so I would say you don't know what you're going to get if you delay for 20, 30 years, 10 years. You know, the world is going to be even worse off. So why wait? Why wait to see things? You may never get a chance to see an orangutan in the wild again. At the rate they're deforesting and the rate the glaciers are receding, you may not get a chance to see a glacier again, or a glacial lake, or something like that. And so it's not just your health, it's not just environmental changes, but it's also cultural changes. I mean, Western culture is exporting the worst qualities of itself around the world. This fast food, consumerism, disposable culture is being exported to every country around the world. And so if you want to truly experience what these cultures are like, there's no time like the present. If you wait a few years, 5, 10 years, it's just going to be even more overrun with, you know, McDonald's, Starbucks, 7-Eleven, all the disposable worst aspects of consumerist Western culture. That's all you're going to have left eventually. That's the way it's moving. It's moving toward a homogenization. And so all these unique cultural elements that you find in these different countries are just disappearing. And so eventually you won't be able to see what it was like. You won't be, I mean, you might get taken on some touristy tour with some actors recreating, you know, tribal dances or something like that, but you won't be able to see it in its natural environment. You know, everywhere, from the jungles to the highest mountains in the world, the cultural homogenization is happening. It's all going to become this global consumerist culture. I've seen it happen. Not only that, but the pollution, air pollution. You know, 6 years ago we were in Nepal for the first time. The air pollution has gotten way worse. I hope that Nepal and other governments can get like the pollution under control, but again, it's, from my point of view, it seems like it's just getting worse. So the sooner you can go and experience these things and see what it's like, the better off you'll be before it's overrun by environmental catastrophe, cultural homogenization, and pollution. I think one of the biggest things I've learned that actually was pretty profound, that I kind of had a vague sort of notion of, but before I experienced it firsthand, I didn't really completely understand, and that is that people are not their governments. You know, people from whatever country they're from, Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, Sudan, wherever, most people in the world just want to live a good, happy life. You know, and sometimes I think, whether it's through propaganda or news or media, at least I have gotten this idea that, oh, you know, this group of people is bad because this is the way that their government operates and this is what they want to do. And it's just not true. You know, it's most people, 99.9% of people want to live a good and happy life. You know, I've met people of all faiths, Sikh, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, and I would say, like, the vast majority of them have been wonderful people, happy people that just want to live a happy life. They just want to, you know, provide for their family. And so I think that is a huge thing when it comes to travel, is you get to experience these people on a personal level. And you get to relate to them on a personal level, which is, if we just sit back in our bubble and we sit back on the couch and we just watch the news and consume all this media and propaganda, you don't realize that the guy in Afghanistan or China, you know, he just wants to live a happy life. He doesn't want to kill me. He doesn't want to destroy my freedom or whatever crap they're feeding us. It's just not true. And the more I travel and the more I meet people, A, the more friends I make, but B, the more I can relate to them on a personal level. And I think we need more of that. I think we need more of that in the world. And that's why it's like an urgency. Like I feel like you should travel as soon as you can. And you should experience as many different cultures and environments and as much as you can, because it's such an intense learning process that it helps you grow as a person. It helps you just see the world through new eyes. It helps you just contribute. I feel like what I can contribute to this world is so much more now than when I wasn't traveling or before I traveled. I feel like I had like a kind of a typical American mentality of, like, I hadn't experienced much, but I felt like I knew everything about the entire world, right? I hadn't traveled the world, but I knew everything about the world. And it's just not the case. And so I just feel like the more that I experience and the more I learn, the more I want to learn. It's almost like an addiction in a way, because I feel so full now. I feel so full of just experience and knowledge and just like relating to these different cultures and people. And it's just, the more that I can do that, it's almost as if I'm becoming more human, if that makes any sense. You know, it's like I'm not sort of this American android, you know, going through this sort of rote life, you know, like factory work or office work. And I've kind of broken out of that cycle of just robotic, what they tell me the life has to be, that's what I do. And it's like, no, I see for myself the reality of what it is. It's not through media or propaganda, it's through my own eyes. I see my friend who's a Muslim who's happy to see me and smiles, and I see the reality of the environment, the reality of this cultural homogenization, and I just feel like my understanding and compassion grows so much through all these experiences. And so that, I feel like the urgency, like not only is it this environmental change, the cultural change, you don't know, I mean, tomorrow is not guaranteed for anybody. So you might say, oh, I want to travel in 10 years. You may get hit by a bus tomorrow. So there's no time like the present, because tomorrow is not guaranteed. So why not live one day at a time, but soak the marrow of that day or that moment, suck that essence as much as possible. You know, there's a poem that I like to quote a lot. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. This same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. And that is the truth about our planet. That is the truth about our experience, our life. This flower, this life that blooms today, that smells sweet and looks beautiful, will be gone tomorrow. And so I beg you, with the urgency in all of my being, to live a full life. That has been my goal with this channel from the beginning, and you don't have to travel to do it. You can explore your own backyard. But I feel like at a certain point, after you've explored all there is to explore in your backyard, you gotta take the next step. You gotta see what's over there. You know, I feel like humans are natural adventurers and explorers. We're meant to be doing constantly new things. And let me tell you, this back to the idea of vacation versus travel. Spending a couple days or a week on a beach, a beautiful paradise beach, gets really boring after a couple days. Maybe 4 or 5 days at the most, and that shit is boring as hell. So exploring and adventure, I mean, that is the crux of living for me. New experiences, growing as a person. If you're not growing as a person and experiencing new things, you're essentially just waiting to die. I mean, that's the stark reality of it. And I don't mean for this to be some sort of nihilistic rant or that you should get the impression that there's no hope, so why bother doing anything. I think, if anything, I want you to understand that it's the opposite that's true. Even if there are things that we can't control happening, even if there are things that we perceive to be negative happening, there is always hope. And that is something that travel has given me and shown me. Obstacles can be overcome. We grow through overcoming these obstacles. Suffering can be overcome. And I think the idea of hope as it pertains to this particular subject is as simple as, looking at the beauty of a flower or listening to the wave crash on the beach. Beauty, love still exist. In this present moment, you just have to attune your dial to it. And so I think that's grown out of a situation where when I've been traveling, I've realized there's good and bad about every place I've been. And so when you only focus on the bad of where you're at, you tune out all the other positive things. And so there's kind of a way of looking at things where you don't judge them as bad or good, and it opens your mind up to kind of this stoicism in a way, where you realize it just is what it is. And even if I perceive something to be negative, for example, if there's a pile of crap on the ground, that crap is fertilizer for the next flower to grow out of it, or the next plant to grow out of it. Or maybe it's just a weed that grows out of it, but that weed has an interesting little purple flower. And sure, the pollen may make me sneeze, but the beauty to my eye in that moment can provide you hope. There is hope, despite the fact that all these things are out of our control, that there's a lot of negativity that we perceive in the world. Once you start overcoming obstacles in your path, and once you start learning new things, you realize there is hope. I guess the most important lesson that I've learned is that despite what may be a setback or a negative thing, there is always something beautiful within the present moment. No matter how hard it is, there is beauty. There is breath in my lungs. There is sun on my bald head. There are flowers. There are waves crashing on the beach. And I think that what I'm trying to say is that travel has made me an enlightened Buddha. If only that were the case. If only it was that easy, right? Buy a ticket to Nepal and become enlightened. No, but seriously, it has made me a better person. It has opened my heart and my mind and my soul to the world around me, to the people around me. And I implore you to do the same thing. You don't have to delay. Get out there, find your adventure, and be infamous.
Infamous.